Have you ever heard that our white blood cells attack foreign antigens? And if not, I'm telling you now, our white blood cells, they work by attacking foreign proteins or foreign antigens, okay? An antigen is something that elicits an immune system response. And antibodies recognize antigens and they bind to those rat antigens and cause all kinds of different activities. We have on our own cells self antigens. A self antigen is an antigen that our body or that our immune system does not respond to. It looks at the antigens and it attacks those that are foreign, and then if it's a self antigen, they ignore it, okay? Hello, there we go. So there are a lot of different antigens on our body cells. On blood, there are multiple antigens, but the most common antigens that we typically focus on are the antigens that determine our blood type, so the AB antigens, and the Rh factor antigen that causes us to have a plus or a minus blood type. So a lot of you are a positive or a negative blood type. And so a lot of you probably have heard your blood type was A positive or O positive or maybe O negative. That is your blood type determined by the different types of antigens that are on your blood. So this picture I just got off of a website. I found it on Google Images, but it was from study.com. And this is just kind of showing what A antigens would look like and B antigens, right? So they're different. They have different shapes. If you have both AB blood type, then you have both A and B antigens. And then if you have a lack of antigens, so you don't have A or B, then you have O blood type. So the main ABO blood group is based on two specific antigens, type A and type B. So lack of either causes you to have O blood. And so here you can see type A blood has type A antigens on their surface. If they have type A antigens on their surface, they have the opposite antibodies in their blood plasma. So they have anti-B antibodies. Type B, I'm sorry, right here. Type B blood has B antigens on the surface. And again, they have the opposite antibodies in their plasma. So they have anti-A antibodies. So these antibodies would attack this blood. These antibodies would attack this blood. Make sense? If you have no antigens, no A or B antigens, then you have O blood. So that's like the no antigens, no A or B antigens on the surface. But because you have no antigens on the surface, you have both antibodies in your blood plasma. And then if you have type A, or if you have both A and B antigens, then you have type AB blood. And in that case, you have no antibodies in your blood plasma for those proteins. And so this is one of the reasons why you have to be tested to determine your blood type before you donate, because they need to put you in a specific group. If you have type A blood, they take your blood, your A blood like this, but if they gave that A blood to a patient that was type B, that patient's antibodies would attack the A blood, which is why they always are checking and making sure that there's not going to be a mismatch in transfusions, because this is what would happen if they had a mismatch, and that would be bad. Make sense? So if you're a type A, you are called the or type AB, I'm sorry, you are called the universal recipient. AB individuals can gain or can take from type A blood, type B blood, type AB blood, and O blood. We have no antibodies in our plasma, so no blood is going to be attacked. If you are type B, you can receive blood from type B and type O. If you're type A, you can receive from type A or type O. And then if you're a type O, you can only receive from O, blood. And so O is called the universal donor. So I am lucky. I have type AB blood, so I'm considered the universal recipient, which means I can take from anybody's blood. I can take any blood and it will be fine. But I can only donate to other type AB patients. Whereas a type O can only receive from type O, but they can donate to anybody. And so if you're looking at in the US population, the different proteins, here we have the proteins on our blood. If you are type AB, you have both A and B antigens. And so again, here's A, here's B, they're on here. We don't have any antibodies in our blood plasma. We are the universal recipient. We can take from anybody, but this is the least common blood in really the world. So in the US, only about 4% of white, 4% of black, 4% of Asian, and less than 1% of Native American actually have this type of blood. Type B blood has B antigens. So here are those B antigens. But they have anti-A antibodies. These anti-A antibodies are going to attack type A blood, but they won't do anything to the type B blood. So B can receive from B and O, and this is more common, but it's still relatively uncommon. So B is the second least common. Only 11% of white, 20% of black, 27% of Asian, and 4% of Native American have type B blood. A is the second most common blood type. Type A has type A antigens on the blood surface and has anti-B antibodies in the blood plasma. These would attack the B proteins, but not A. They can receive blood from A and O, and 40% of white, 27% of black, 28% of Asian, and 16% of Native American population have type A blood. The most common blood then is O. O has no antigens, but has both antibodies. Has both anti-A and anti-B antibodies. So O is called a universal donor. 45% of white, 49% of black, 40% of Asian, and 79% of Native Americans have the O blood type. So this is the most common blood. The next protein we'll talk about is the Rh factor, or the Rh group. So there are multiple Rh antigens, but the most common Rh antigen that we talk about is RhD. And this Rh antigen is what gives us our Rh positive or negative status in our blood. Most people have Rh positive blood, which means they carry that Rh antigen. Those that are Rh negative do not have that Rh antigen. But those that are Rh negative also do not have antibodies. So we don't have antibodies in our system just because we have no Rh factor. So I want to explain really quick. The Rh group was initially found in rhesus monkeys, and that's where the Rh came from. So it's actually rhesus antigen, but we just shortened it to Rh, okay? So if you have Rh negative blood and you receive from an Rh positive individual, so say you have, I'm just going to go back, say you have type O negative and you received blood from an O positive, we would then start producing antibodies against the Rh factor. And then our system would contain those antibodies. And if we had a second transfusion with the same O positive blood, our antibodies would attack the Rh factor. So in general, Rh problems are more, the Rh factor causes more problems during pregnancy and during blood transfusions. So if you are Rh negative and you are pregnant with an Rh positive child, your body is going to respond to that Rh factor and produce antibodies. Usually the first child is going to be born, and that's when you produce those antibodies. You become sensitized, you have these antibodies. And then if you get pregnant again, those antibodies are going to attack that fetus, and it can cause the fetus to be aborted, or it can cause the baby to be born early with a lot of problems. So here is a picture of what I'm talking about. The initial first pregnancy, the Rh factor causes mom's immune system to produce antibodies. So if she gets pregnant a second time, those antibodies are going to flood her system when they realize that there's another foreign invader, and they will attack. Now, because of this, we tend to, if we have Rh negative blood, they will give us a shot called RhoGAM. RhoGAM prevents our body from producing antibodies against the Rh factor. So I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe you get a shot at around 27 weeks and then a shot right after birth to make sure that you don't produce those antibodies. Hold on one second. I want to see how far I have because it's already 12 minutes. So I only have about 4 slides left, so I'm going to finish this. So this might be a little bit longer, but that's okay. The last thing we'll talk about is blood typing. So because we have different antigens on our blood, and the different antigens will be associated with the different antibodies in our blood plasma. We tend to type the blood before we actually give blood, donate blood, or receive blood. How we do this is we take antibodies, so anti-A and anti-B serum, that's just anti-A antibodies or anti-B antibodies. So an anti-A antibody would attack a protein A. Makes sense? Anti-B antibodies will attack a protein B. So what we do is we put the anti-A antibodies and the anti-B antibodies on a slide. We then add a drop of our own blood. If anti-A antibodies find their protein, their A proteins, they will attack and cause the blood to clump up. That's called agglutination. If the anti-B antibodies find their proteins, then they will attack and cause clumping. So if you have clumping with both A and B antibodies, then you have type A and type B blood, or AB blood. If you have clumping with just the B antibodies, then you have type B blood. If you have clumping with just the A antibodies, you have type A blood. And if you have no clumping, that means that you have type O blood. So I already told you that hematopoiesis occurs in our bone marrow, in red bone marrow, and that is true. But prior to birth, the fetus has blood cell formation occurring in the liver and the spleen. At about 7 months, that's when the bone marrow takes over hematopoiesis. So fetal blood is a little different than neonate or normal blood. In the fetus, the hemoglobin, fetal hemoglobin is very different. It has a higher affinity to oxygen than normal hemoglobin. Hello, go over, okay. And because of that, this can cause problems. Fetal hemoglobin differs, and so initially the fetal hemoglobin is really important because we want the oxygen to leave mom's blood to go to the fetus through that placenta so that the fetus gets its oxygen that it needs to produce the cells because it's growing at a very rapid rate. But once the baby is born, all that fetal hemoglobin has to be broken down. And so fetal hemoglobin gets broken down immediately as the baby is being born. If the liver is not working at top or at its best, then it's not always breaking down the hemoglobin fast enough, and this can cause jaundice to occur. Jaundice, that yellowing of the skin and the eyes, is often seen in infants in the first week or two of life, and oftentimes this jaundice will be the baby will get over the jaundice on his own. Sometimes they use Billy lights, or they usually it's just Billy lights that they'll use that will help to break down that hemoglobin at a faster rate. If that doesn't help, though, the hemoglobin, fetal hemoglobin, can actually cause damage to the brain. And that's why jaundice is such a problem. So it's not so much that we're worried because the child's skin color changes. It's because we don't want that hemoglobin to get to the brain. Another disorder associated with blood is leukemia. So leukemia is cancer of our white blood cells. Often this is associated with infants or young children and then older adults. So at this point, you should be able to tell me what are the two protein antigens that determine blood type? Who is the universal recipient? Who is the universal donor? What is the most common blood type? What is the rarest blood type? What is the Rh factor? What is the problem with being Rh negative and carrying an Rh positive fetus? What is ROGAM? And what is jaundice? I think that is it. So I'm going to stop this video now and I will upload it. Have a great night or day, whatever. Bye.